Good morning, guys. Welcome to Sale Virtual Tech Talent Program. So, in the last class, I understood that you guys learned about some HTML tags. So, today we'll be learning about some other HTML tags known as HTML tables and HTML forms. So, in the content of what we are to discuss today, we have first the HTML table. Under it, we have what is HTML table. We are going to know what it is. We're also going to understand its syntax. We're also going to understand that there are other tags within the table tag which are very important in the entire structure of the table tag. And we'd also learn about the functions of each of these tags. And also would also have an example of the whole tags put together under the table tag. So in the second section, we have the HTML form tags. So under this, we would understand about the HTML form tag, its syntax, the tags that are embedded within the form tag, which are the input tags, the label tags, and the text area tags. Now, each of these tags have several attributes that are very, very important, and would also have a quick look with on the HTML table tags and other related tags. First, we have the HTML table tag. What is HTML table tag? HTML table tag is a tag construct that enables us and a user to structure data in tabular form, e.g., in forms of rows and columns. So I understand that we are not new to data that are being in rows and column forms. For many of us, we must have used Microsoft Excel, and Excel has, rows and columns within its spreadsheet. So the table tag is similar to that. Also, we can understand that the table tags can take in data of different formats, which includes text, images, and links. Although there are many various other formats that are included, but right now in this program, we'll be focusing on just these three formats. HTML table tag syntax is the next thing we'll be talking about. So we have the syntax of the HTML table tag as seen below. So I'm guessing you all can see the syntax. It's in red ink. So you can see it's a multi-line, it's a multi-tag. That means it has an open tag and a close tag. So from what we can observe, we can see that the syntax of the table tag has other tags embedded within itself. This is because the table tag, unlike most HTML tags, does not directly take in data from the user. Rather, the table tag houses or it accommodates other tags within itself, which contains the desired data from the user. So what this basically means is that you the table tag isn't like most tags like the anchor tag, the p tag, the heading tag, some of these tags that contain text directly in between them. The table tag doesn't work that way. Rather, the table tag has sub tags within itself. So those tags are what are used to structure the data within the table. So as you can see in the syntax on the screen, within the table tags is the th tag, the td tag, and also the tr tag. So there are more than these tags that are within the table tag, but we'll get to know that in the future slides. Other tags within the table tag is the next section. So, like I explained before in the previous section, the table tag has other tags embedded within itself. So, the following tags here are part of what defines the entire structure of the table tags because the table tags are used to arrange data in a particular order. So without these tags, you won't be able to, arrange information the way you want it. Just take the Microsoft Excel package as an instance. It has rows and columns that people use to arrange information. That's how the table tag works. So these tags, the first tag is the table head tag, which we can see the syntax by the side. It's a multi-tag and it has the T head enclosed in the braces. The second important tag is the table body tag. Of course, we know what the body is since we learnt the basics of HTML. The body is what houses the main content about the whole table. Then we have the data tag. The data tag is also an important part of the table tag. So the data tag is what actually holds the particular data from the user that's within the body tag itself. So we can also see the syntax, it's in TD and it's a multi-tag too. Then we have the table row tag. So I believe we all know what a row is, rows and columns. So the table row tag basically is just a collection of the table data tags within the body tags, but on the same row. That means they are arranged vertically. So that's the what the tag is meant for. And we also see the syntax. It's in TR. So next we have the table header tag. Of course, we all know what a header is in HTML, but this header tag here is particularly for the table. It's not the regular header tag in an HTML document. No, this is for the table itself. It's like what outlines the heading. That's the head of the column, what each column stands for. That's what the table header tag is for. And we can see the syntax in TH. So these are the tags that form up the entire structure of the table tag put together. Now, the next section is the functions of the tags. Though I've explained some of them, but I feel there is still need to go deeper into it. So we have again the table head tag, which is connoted with T head and is a multi-tag. The T head tag is used to arrange the contents of the header of an HTML table. So I think this is self-explanatory. So that basically means that the T head tag is used to arrange the contents of the header of the HTML table. So each column of each table has a specific meaning of what that column is. You know, it's like just take an Excel spreadsheet as an example, in some for those who have worked with that package before, you would notice that you could actually put a name, address, email. Some of this information are used to connote what the entire column under it is for. It tells you the type of data that is meant to be under it. So that's what the table head tag function is in the table tag. So next we have the table body tag. The table body tag is used to arrange the content of the body of an HTML table. So we know what the body is basically. The body basically houses all the major informations that are needed from the user. That means everything the user is to put inside. Now, the body tag does not contain the contents of the table head tag. They are separate. By that I mean that the body tag is not going to contain keywords like name, address, house, full name, username. Those things are descriptive. So the body tag isn't going to contain that. Rather, it's going to contain the information under each of those table head tags. I hope you all are, I hope you all understand me. Then you have the next tag, which is the table data tag, connoted in TD. So the TD tag describes the cell in the HTML table. Yes, so as I explained before, comparing it with Microsoft Excel package for those who have worked with it. So it's basically the same thing. So the data tag just describes the cell, each of those cells within the table body tag. That's the T body tag. So next we have the table row tag, which is connoted as TR. The TR tag describes the rows of cells in the HTML table. So, of course, at one point in time, we must have heard of rows and columns. I don't think it's a new thing. So, rows are basically it's something that just goes vertically. So, all the cells arranged within a table, within a table that are vertical, that's what the table row tag holds. So, if you are to arrange tags vertically on the table, you will need to use the table row tag. So lastly, we have the table header tag. The table header tag is used to outline the header cells in the HTML table. Of course, we know what an header is the main descriptive content of what the entire body is. It's what comes before any other content. That's why the table header tag is so important, because it outlines the header cells. Now, these cells are very descriptive. I think the table header tag and the table head tag, they have some some similarities, but there are also some differences too, which will be explained when we get into the actual coding. So here we have a quick example of an entire HTML table tag. So this is a picture of a table tag that's on the right side of the screen, and on the left is just some descriptive notes on what you have in the picture. So from the image on the right, we can see that the table tag is the highest tag. That's in the hierarchy of arranging the tags. It comes first, and with proper indentation, this code on the left should be easy for us to understand. But for those that don't understand, don't worry, I will explain it when we start the actual coding. So the table tag, as I explained, comes first. Then you have the next two sections. Just like an HTML document, when you start it, you would always have the head tag and the body tag. The head tag contains the descriptive content about the HTML document, while the body tag contains the actual content of that document, which is to be displayed when rendered on a browser. So that's the same thing with the table head tag and the table body tag. And as you can see from this picture, we have the table row tag and the table header tag within the table head tag. Now, I said before that the table head tag and the header tag, they sound like, they have some similarities, but then they are different. The table head tag actually houses the table header tag within itself. So the table head tag is like a container for the header tags. That means it's basically like it just covers the entire table header tag within itself. Remember that the header tags are what outlines the header cells, and the header cells are meant to be descriptive. That means they are not really the major information we are passing, but they are just to describe what is to come later on. That's in the body tag. That's the table body tag. So within the table head tag, we have the TR tag first of all. Within the TR tag, we then have the TH tag, which we all know as the table header tag. So the table header tag contains a TR tag and some TH tag, which describes the headers of the table. So I think I've explained that already. That's why if you look at the right side of the screen, you would notice that within the table header tag, in the table row tag, and that's the two of them combined under the table head tag, we have the first name, last name, and email. Now, this set of words or strings, they are very descriptive. So that would mean that whatever is to come under the column of the first table header tag, which is called first name, would have to be the first name of a particular individual or person. Same goes to the last name, which is in a separate table header tag. So if you have a name that is structured as John Doe, you would have John under the first name and Doe under the second name. Then we have the last table header tag, which is the email section. So the email section will house emails. So that means on that column, you are not meant to have any other type of string or words other than an email. So I hope you're able to understand the whole context of the table head tag. And I hope we also know that the table head tag and the table header tag are also different. Yet, yes, I understand that they sound so similar, but there are still some differences. One of them is just the overall tag to house the other one within itself. So, nextly, we have the table body tag, which contains three table row tags, and in between each of them are the TD tags. So, we talked about the TD tags before, which are the table data tags. So, these tags are actually what describe the actual information passed by the user. Now, the TD tag isn't going to have first name, last name, email. It's not going to have any descriptive content whatsoever. This particular tag is meant to have the actual information, that is the real content you are presenting. That's why it's under the table body tag. I used the HTML structure to explain this, the way we have the head tag and the body tag. So that's how the T head tag and the T body tag is under the table tag. So under the table body tag, we have the TR tags, which are the row tags. Now you can see that from the structure in this picture, the TD tags are arranged horizontally. That's due to the coding, and you can see the first string in the TD tag, the first word, which is Sheyi, the second, which is Williams, and the third, which is sheyiwills21 at yahoo.com. Now, when this is rendered on the browser, the very first TD tag is going to go under the very first TH tag in the table head tag. Likewise, the second will go under the last name, which is Williams, and the third, which is sheyiwills21 at yahoo.com, would go under the email section. So that means vertically, you're going to have the first name, last name, and email as the header tags first. Underneath that, you then have the actual content, which would be Sheyi under the first name, Williams under the last name, then sheyiwills@yahoo.com under the email tag. I mean, sorry, the email section. So we also have the next TR tag, which is, similar with the first one. It contains three TD tags, a marker, which will be under Sheyi. Now, they are all going to be arranged sequentially according to how they appear on the picture. That's during the coding, according to how they appear on your code when we start writing the code. It's not going to get scattered. They are going to arrange themselves properly. Don't worry about how the whole thing works with the coding. I will explain that to you in a bit. So we would have Amaka, which will be under Sheyi. Then we would have Ikechukwu. Ikechukwu now will be under Williams. And then amakaike29@gmail.com would be under sheyiwills21@yahoo.com. So that's like the proper structure of the table tag. It just arranges everything properly the way it's meant to be. Like okay, likewise the third table row tag too, which has goodness or SAS goodness23 at outlook.com. It's also going to yield the same outcome as the first two tags. So you would have goodness under Amaka or SAS under Ikechukwu, goodness23 at outlook.com under Amaka Ike29 at gmail.com. So that's how the order is going to look like when rendered on a browser, which we'll talk about later very soon. So I know probably one person out there might be thinking, what if a particular TD tag isn't available? Let's imagine we don't have the sheyiwills21@yahoo.com. What will happen? Yes, what basically will happen is that that particular space where we don't have a tag to complete the number of th tag that already exists is going to be empty, because already we have defined the table head tags with three table header tags. So we have basically told the table tags that, look, there are going to be three headers for three different types of data. So if you have any data that is lesser than that number, it means that that space is going to be empty. It will not contain any tag. And if the next set of tags, that's the next TR tag, which has Amaka Ikechukwu and Amaka Ike29@gmail.com, would come next, that would mean that the Amaka ek29@gmail.com is going to be under the email tag, but there's going to be a space which connotes that a particular table data tag within the first row is missing, because we've already defined it that there are going to be three different types of table data tags. If they are lesser, it won't auto complete anything. It's just going to leave it blank until we add something to it. And except that, that's how it is going to remain. No matter how many tags keep coming, that space will remain dormant, nothing there. Any other tag that falls into that email column will just go under that space. And like that, they will just arrange themselves there. And that's how it's going to be. And also you might wonder, what if we have more than the table row tags? Let's assume we have Sheyi, we have Williams, then with his email, and let's assume we add another TD tag into it. Of course, the table head tag was already defined to contain three table headers. So if we have more than that number, it's going to extend outside the table. That means that that particular table data tag, because it's more than the table header tag that was created, it's going to be outside. It's not going to shift or merge or try to, push itself with the other tags just so it could contain itself within the table. It's not going to happen. It's going to be outside the tag, which means that there will be no table header tag to show what that particular data means. That means it won't be descriptive. It's not something you would know about. There will be nothing to describe what it contains. It's just going to be there. And if you have more table data tags and they are more than the table header tags that were created, they will just line up like that outside the table structure. They are not going to be included. Yes, your syntax might be correct, your code might be correct, but it's going to work actually. You won't have an error, but it's not going to be within the table. So I hope we all understand how the table tag works, how the table head tag also works. I hope you also understand that the table header tag and the table head tags are different. Yes, they sound so similar, but one of them houses the other inside itself. So one of them is just like the main picture, while the other one is like what just follows it from behind. So I hope you understand the table head tag, the table body tags, the table row tags, the table data tags too. I hope we're able to understand that even when you have lesser tables, you would only just create a dormant space there, which means the table head tag would be expecting a particular data to be passed into that spot. But because you didn't pass anything, it's just going to be there. And likewise when you have it more than the table header, it's just going to extend outside the table. That means it's not going to come into the table. It's just going to be an extension. In fact, having that kind of structure, you could confuse people who would see your table tag and they'll be like, wow, what's this? Like, there's nothing to describe the content outside. It's just there. Yes, no error, code is correct. Visual Studio won't tell you anything to do. They won't tell you any syntax error. It will just look like you are doing fine, but in actual sense, you are not doing fine because you need to make sure that the number of table header tags within the table head tags are the same as the number of table data tags within the table body tags. They have to be equal. That's the only way to get accurate results while coding and while using it to, represent data on a table. Thank you. So, our next section is the HTML form tags. So, I believe nobody here is new to what a form is. At least once upon a time, we all must have known about forms, either on a website, social media. It's that thing that comes first where they tell you to log in your details. That's for those who have registered before, or if you're a new member of that particular app or website, they would take you to a register page where you would also meet a form. Most times the register forms are always more than the login forms. That's because, for you to register, they will need to take a lot of your details, which is why the form tag is very, very important and essential. I don't think there's any website or app that would need, information from people that wouldn't make use of the form tag. I don't think so. Every app has it one way or the other, either to log in, to register, to add a picture, to add an image, to upload a document. Some even have it as a normal, you know, as a normal package just to register on different, medias. So, like we are discussing about HTML form tags. What is HTML form tags? So in the next slide, we would understand what a form tag is, why it is so important and so essential to a web page, especially if your web page is something that involves taking people's data and information. I don't mean illegally, I mean legally. So HTML form tag is a tag that is used in creating forms that take input from users. So it's just like I explained previously. You know, the form tags are used by most websites, social media apps, even banks now have it. When you want to create an account online, you need it because you would have to slot in your details inside your first name, your last name, your address, phone number, BVN number, date of birth, your age, some of these important info that are needed, from them. So these form tags are popular on many web pages, as I've said earlier. They are mostly used for registration processes and login systems. I've already talked about that. Registration processes, your social media, your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Jumia, you know, it just cuts across different platforms. The login form is just really important. That's it. So, in our next session, we'll be diving into the HTML form tag syntax. So, in the next slide, we'll be seeing how the syntax of the HTML form tag looks like how it is being structured, because it is also similar with the table tag, not in the structure. I mean, not in the content, but in the structure, because the form tag also has some set of important tags embedded within it. So just like the HTML table tags, the HTML table tags had the T head tag and the T body tag within itself. So the form tags also has some important tags within itself also, which we'll be learning about in the next slide. So here we have the syntax of the HTML form tag. Sorry, that was an error. So in the syntax we can see above, you can see that it has a form, it's a multi-tag, and it's written with form enclosed in the greater than and less than sign, which is the normal coding standard for tags. So the form tag acts as a container to other tags such as the input tags, the label tags, the text area tags. These tags are of great importance in building an HTML form, and they all independently play different roles within the form tag. So here we can understand that the form tag also doesn't house, direct information within its syntax. Rather, it has other tags within its syntax which would house those data or information that is being passed by the user. An example is the input tag. We'll discuss about that very soon. Also, the label tag too, a very, very important tag. In fact, the input tag and the label tags are so close, like it's almost like they need each other. Not that they need each other, they are independent, but they just need to be close to one another. because that's way you have better understanding of the forms you'll be creating. So because when we dive into it, you would realize that the input tag, yes, it's an independent tag, but it can't really give itself the actual description of what it's holding. That means when it's rendered on the browser. Unlike on the code, you can understand that okay, this is what the input tag is for. But on the browser, when you render it, it's just you're just going to see a block of an empty space, and you would know what it's called, which is why the label tag is very important and the two of them need to stick together. Then we also have the text area tag. It's also similar to the input tag, but it's just like a bigger version of the input tag actually. The text area and the input tag, they serve the same purpose on a form, but the text area tag accommodates much more data. That means unlike the input tag mostly just takes a few a few blocks of data, probably just name, first name, last name, gender, and all of that. But when you want to, accept large amounts of text like a comment or a review, there are a lot of people out there who give bad reviews on different products, so they would want to write a lot of content. So if you had an input tag replacing the text area tag, it's going to take a long time to get what they want. But with the text area tag, they can easily see the whole thing they are putting out there, and then that's it. So on to the next slide. The input tag. Yes, so this is the very first tag under the form tag. Probably I would say it's one of the most important tag, if not the most important tag, because without the input tag, you can't have a form. The input tag, from the word input, it means that's like the space that would actually take in the information you are passing into the form. So just imagine you never have that tag, then where do you want to pass the information to? Nowhere. There's nowhere there's nowhere you'd be able to take it to. That's why the input tag is very, very essential. Not like the other tags are not important, they are also important too. But the input tag plays a major role in taking the data itself. Just imagine the input tag as a cell within the table, as we discussed earlier. Without the cell, you can't pass in any actual data into the table. The table houses the body tag, which contains the main content, and within the body tags is the table row tags, and within the table row tags is the table data tags. Without those data tags within the table, you can't pass in anything into it. That's just how the input tag is. So we move on. The input tag. So the input tag is used within the form tag to state controls that enables the user to input data. So I just explained that before on why the input tag is so important, because without it, you can't input data. You can't. It's just so essential. It's very, very important. The input tag is going to be explained much more very soon when we start doing the actual coding. So the input tag from the syntax below can be observed as a single tag. That is, there is no closing tag at all. So the input tag is a single tag. There are no closing tags. So it's just one independent tag on its own. Some call it self-closing tags. You could also call it that too. So that's basically how the input tag has its syntax. It's not a multi-tag. It doesn't have anything closing it. Everything that is to be in within the tag is going to be within that single tag. Anything outside is going to be rendered invalid and not part of the input tag at all. So next we have the syntax. As we can see on the screen, the input tag, you can see that the input tag is a single tag with some keywords inside. Now, those keywords you see there, the type, the name, the ID, the value, those are the attributes of this input tag. You know, they are like the things that give the tag much more meaning. It just describes what the input tag really is all about. you know but these attributes here are the things that only you, the user who programs this, would understand, because when you render this input tag on the web browser, this none of this information is going to show there. So that's why I said at first that the input tag and the label tag, which we'll still come to, are together. They are very, very important together. So we can note that the type, name, ID, and value are seen in the syntax, and they are the attributes of the input tags. So we can see the attributes, the type attributes, the name attributes, the ID attributes, and the value attributes. So our next section is the attributes of the input tags. So we are going to learn about the things that give this input tag more meaning, more understanding, like what is it really all about. You'll get to know that very soon. First, we have the type attribute. The type attribute is used to determine the format of data to be passed into the form by the user. So you can see how important this attribute is, this particular one. It determines the format because, as we all know, data and information comes in different formats. It could be a text, could be a video, a music, it could be an image, a number, a button, emails, all of that. So this particular attribute tells the input what it actually is. It determines the format, which means that once it's once the type attribute is already stated, you cannot put data of a different format rather than outside the one that has been created already. So examples of these formats are text, image, number, email, password, submit, etc. These formats are among the most commonly used formats because they are way much more aside from this. Yes, so like I explained, the data formats are way much more than just text, image, numbers, email, password, submit. There are a lot of type attributes, a lot under the input tag. There's checkbox is there, radio is there. There are so many types of type attributes under the input tag. But the most that we commonly know about and see most times when you register on a web page is the image attribute, which would enable you to upload a picture. Then you could have the text attribute, which is the most popular one. It enables you to put in a text into it, probably your first name, your last name, your email address. Also, we have the number attribute. That one allows you to put any number of your choice. Your phone number is there, your PIN is there, your when you are filling that form on when you try to pay for stuff online, there's that part where they will tell you to fill in your CVV, then the last four digits of your ATM, and also I think your PIN. Yes, so that particular section of that form that you use when you are making transactions online uses the number data format under the type attribute, because if you try to put in any word or any alphabet, it's going to get rejected because it has been determined already that the format of that data is meant to be a number. That's why you see it's so precise. If you try any alphabet, it might not even work. Most times it doesn't work. And even if it works, it won't authenticate because a number has been expected and not an alphabet. So let's go on. So we have the name attribute. This attribute is used to describe what the input tag is meant for. Now, unlike the type attribute we learnt about before, the type attribute is used to describe the format of the type of data that will be passed in to the input tag. But here the name attribute gives more meaning to what the input tag really is all about. For instance, if you have an input tag that is meant for a user to input his first name, then the name attribute within the input tag, yes, would be assigned with the first name. That is, name will be equals to first name, which is in double quotation marks. So the name attribute basically tells you what the input tag really is all about. Of course, it would sound so strange that, okay, just imagine you created an input tag in which the name attribute is first name and the data format is numbers. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So if you already have the data format to be numbers, it means that the name attribute has to be named according to something that connotes digits. For instance, your telephone number, your ATM pin, your date of birth, anything that includes digits without any form of strings uses that kind of format, and its name attribute would be anything that describes numbers. That's why the name attribute is important. It just tells you what the input tag really wants. You can't set a name attribute to be as the first name and the format would be a string or a password. It wouldn't make sense at all. So I hope you guys understand the name attribute tag. So we move on to the next important tag, which is the ID attribute. The ID attribute serves the same function as the name attribute. It's also used to describe the input tag. So that actually means that most of the time, whenever you've assigned a particular string or number to the name attribute, it's all it's almost going to be just as the same with the ID attribute. Like in our last example, we understood that if an input tag is used to describe the first name of a person, then the name attribute is meant to have first name assigned to it. So that means if that same input tag has an ID attribute, the ID attribute is also meant to take the first name too. That's why I said it serves the same function as the name attribute. Although the ID attribute is quite different from the name attribute, as it serves as an identifier which makes it unique in nature. Now, though the ID attribute and the name attribute might be similar, yet there are some very, very critical differences. Why is because the ID attribute within an input tag is meant to be unique. By that, being unique in nature, That implies that no two input tags can have the same ID. The ID attribute and the name attribute, yes, they both describe the input tag, fine. But the ID attribute is meant to be very, very unique in such a way that no matter how many other input tags we have in that form, that particular ID attribute cannot have the same text assigned to it and to another input tag again. That means if you have probably a form of 10 input tags, it means that you are going to have 10 different attributes under each of those input tags. Yes, no two ID attributes would be the same. It's going to be totally different. But there are cases where the input tag has the same name attributes. Yeah, so probably might be on a web page and a person who develops the form for the website probably decided that okay, we have these input tags. The first input tag is for first name, the second input tag is for last name. Now, that individual creating that particular form can decide to assign the keyword name to the name attribute. You can just decide to put it that way. He could just say within the input tag, he could say the name attribute is equals to name. He could also do that in the second input tag, which is for the last name. So the first name, the input tag for the first name can have the name attribute of name. The input tag for the last name can also have the name attribute of name. So there are cases whereby the input tags are, similar. I mean, there are cases whereby the name attributes within the input tags are similar. But the ID attribute cannot be similar. It must be very, very unique and distinctive. It has to be. If he is to have an ID attribute within the first input tag, which is for the first name, the ID attribute there can be assigned first name, while in the second input tag for the last name, the ID attributes can be assigned last name. They must not have, they must never have the same values. It must be so unique. That way you would know that this is the first name, this is the last name. So if peradventure he wants to reference the input tag probably when he's styling, if he should reference the input tag using the name attribute, probably he wants to change some things in the in the first name input tag. If he should reference that by the name attribute, it's not just going to affect the first name, it's also going to affect the last name, because both of those name attributes within the input tags, they hold the same values. So the computer would be like, okay, name attributes, anywhere it sees name attributes assigned to this value, he that's the unique thing about the computer. It doesn't care what you actually want. What it cares about is what it sees and what it knows. So if you have the name attributes within several input tags to be assigned the same value, the moment you reference it by the name attribute, it's going to make changes to all the inputs, which is why the ID attribute is very important and it has to be very unique. So that way, if you want to make changes to just one particular input tag, rather than referencing it with the name attribute, which could be conflicting with other inputs, you could just use the ID attribute of that particular input tag, and any change you apply to it will just appear on that particular input tag and no other tag. That's why the ID attributes is so important. So I hope you understand the difference between the name attributes and the ID attributes. So we move to the next attribute. The next attribute is the value attribute. Of course, it's not a new thing. Sorry, it's not a new thing when you visit a website. Within the box where you are to input your data, you would already meet a particular string there, which is just used to tell you that okay, this is what this particular section of the form is for. I'm not talking of what you see on top of it, just within, when you try to log in on Facebook, Instagram, you could see some tiny text inside. It could be written there: phone, name, email, all of that. So those are,
Sorry, quick one.
yeah.
Please, can you reshare your screen? It looks like we've lost. Just reshare your screen. Thank
Okay. So sorry for that interruption. So we're talking about the value attributes under the input tag. So the value attribute is used to specify an initial value in the input tag before a user inputs data. That is, in the input box, which is rendered on the browser. Don't worry if you don't understand it, we'll get there very soon, I promise. When the input box is rendered on the browser, in some particular forms on some web pages or some apps, you would see like a little text within that box where you have to slot in your data. It's just for you to know that okay, this is what you have to put in. So an initial value would exist just before a user inputs data into it. Yeah. Note, there are more attributes that the input tag consists of. Yes, aside from the type attributes, name attributes, ID attributes, value attributes, there are much more attributes. There are a lot. There are a lot. But the thing is, the most popular ones that most developers work with are these four, at least majorly these four. Any other one could be for some sophisticated kind of functionalities on the forms, which we would not get into now, probably later on in the future. Yes, so the next tag we have under the form tag is the label tag, which we'll be diving into in a while. So I explained that the label tag is so important with the input tag. So from what we learned before, we've realized that within the input tag is the type attribute, which explains the format of the data to be passed into it. We also got to understand about the name attribute. That basically describes what the input tag is really all about. Then the next tag we understood about was the ID attribute, which also functions with the name attribute, but in a very unique way. Yes, it feels like they do the same thing, but at the same time, they don't really. That's in some very, very unique conditions. And lastly, we talked about the value attributes. So the name and the ID attributes are used to describe the input attribute to you, the developer or the coder or the person who programs them. So that basically means that the person who creates the form would understand what the input tag is for. That's with those attributes already. But when rendered on the browser, the user who is to use it, that means the user who is to log in through that system, would not know what the tag is for, would not know what the input tag is meant for. without the label tag, which is why the label tag is very important. Of course, the developer who made it knows what the input tag is for, because he obviously gave assigned a value to the name tag, to the name attribute and to the ID attribute, which already describes it. So if the developer decides not to add a label tag, he knows what it's meant for already. But you who is out there, who is to use it, you don't know what it's for. You just see an empty box. You don't know what to put in. You don't know what type of data format. It doesn't tell you anything descriptive. That's why the label tag is very important. So let's move. The label tag. The label tag assigns a label to the input tag. So just take the label tag as a brand. For instance, you go to the market, you buy shoes, you buy clothes. Of course, some particular people don't like to just buy any clothes they see or any shoe they see. They like to buy the ones from a particular brand. That means the ones that have a particular description on it, that okay, it's associated with this brand. It could be a Nike shirt, Puma, Reebok. Some of these brands on these products, they are also labels, because without those brand labels, you won't know what line would own that particular thing you're purchasing. You'd just basically be purchasing a thing without a description, a thing without a name. I don't think there's anything that exists now that doesn't have a label or something on the body to explain it, except it's a fake product, which I pray none of us are buying. So the label tag is a multi-tag, and it has an opening and an ending tag. So of course we know what a multi-tag is. It's a tag with an opening tag and a closing tag. So we can see the syntax of the label tag. It also has its own attributes. Now, funny enough, the label tag has just one attribute. Like, that's the only attribute within the label tag, and it's the four attributes. So we'll get to know what that four attributes actually does to the label tag very soon. So of course, like we mentioned, the attributes of the label tag, which is the four attributes, is what we'll be dealing with in this section. So the four attributes is the only attribute within the label tag. The four attributes mainly functions as an identifier between a label tag and an input tag. So of course, I explained this before on why the label tag and the input tag are very, very important being together. Like, no one of them can say they don't need the other. It would be so strange for you to visit a form on a web page, or on a on an app that would just have a label, probably first name, and then there is no box to fill your information into. And it would be also strange to have an input tag without a label tag, which will just show an empty box and nothing to describe what the box is meant to contain. That's why the four attributes is important. So it functions as the identifier. So whatever the input tag contains within its attributes, the four tag assign that would also contain that within the label tag. So lastly, we have the text area tag. Yes, so I said the text area tag before. Is It does the same function as the input tag, but then the input tag is quite limited in terms of how it is defined, because most times the input tag is just a rectangular box which could only house, some particular amount of info, probably your first name, your last name, and some other quick informations, you could just typing. But when you want to, put in lots of amounts of text like comments, or you want to put in reviews. A lot of people put in bad reviews on the internet, trust me, and there are a lot. They will just go there and pour out a lot of text. Of course, if you used an input tag to do it, it's going to look very strange because the input tag is so limited in terms of the visualization. You might be typing on the input tag, you might keep typing, but the more you keep typing, the more the text you're putting in, it keeps going inside. So you won't see the entire thing you just wrote. And that's what makes the text area tag important because it shows everything. It's just an input tag, but a bigger and a wider version of the input tag. So let's move. So the text area tag is used to specify multi-line text inputs. So I think this explanation is quite simple. So this basically means that the text area tag specifies multiple line text input, while the input tag that we learnt about before specifies single line text input. That's why I said if you were to fill a form where you were to input your first name, your last name, those are some information that doesn't need to go to the next line. You just fill it on the first line, everything, your first name, then your last name, then your middle name. For those that ask for username, the same, they are all single line. But text inputs like comments, which could be a lot because comments are very, very descriptive on the person's perception on a particular thing or a particular review, what the person feels about a product he bought. It's going to be a lot of text input. So that's why text area tag is very important. So as I said earlier, it's often used to collect large amounts of text such as comments and reviews. Yeah, so we've talked about this already. Yeah, so the text area tag is also a multi-tag. Is also a multi-tag like the label tag. So unlike the input tag needs, the label tag, but the text area tag is a multi-tag. So both the information that would describe it when it's rendered on the browser would also be displayed out there. So we can see the syntax of the text area tag. It has three different attributes, which are the name attribute similar to the input tag. It also has the row attribute and it also has the cos attribute. The cos attribute actually means the column attribute, but in short, that's due to the coding standard, it's actually written as cos. Next, we have the attributes of the text area tag, which we just saw: the name attribute, the row attribute, and the cos attribute, that's the column attribute. So first we have the name attribute. The name attribute serves the same function in the text area tag as well as the input tag. So you can see that the input tag and the text area tag, they are not really different. The two tags both houses information. That means they are used to pass user inputs, that's text inputs. And they both have the name attribute which describes the tag, that's from the developer's end and not from the person who is to use it on the web browser. So that is, it describes what the text area tag is meant for. So just the same way the name attribute describes the input tag, that's to the developer, the person who coded that tag. That's also the same function it serves here in the text area tag. So we'll move on to the next tag. So we have the rows and the cols attributes. These attributes are used to specify the number of rows and columns for the text area fields. So don't worry, we'll be seeing more of this thing practically once we are done with this entire session. So just imagine a row and a column. The text area field is very similar with the input field, but then the row attributes and the column attributes are used to describe, to specify how long or how wide the text area field would be. Because if you were to use a text area field probably to house multi-line inputs like comments, if the text area field isn't wide enough for someone who just wants to dish out a lot of comments to the field, he might also suffer the same problem as the input field, which is why the rows and the column attributes are important. The row attribute determines how wide, then the column attribute determines how long the field will be. Just imagine registering on a particular form where they ask you to fill your address. Most times you would notice that that particular input is a lot bigger than the input for the first name, for the last name, for the date of birth. It's just bigger than those other inputs. So that particular input you are seeing there, most times used for addresses, comments, reviews, probably a description about a particular product. Those particular input field are actually text area fields. So we would have a quick example of the entire form tags. That's the form tags with the input tag, label tags, and text area tags. So this is exactly what it's going to look like very soon when we start going into practice with the coding. So we can see the form tag. It's the overall tag where every other tag is housed within. Next, we have the label tag. You can see the label tag. The within the label tag is the for tag. So I explained that the for tag, the for attributes, it describes the label tag, but with reference to the input tag. So you can see that the four attributes within the label tag is also the same as the name tag and the ID tag in the input tag, and also the value tag too. So next we have the next tag, which is the next section, which is the label tag for the last name. It also has its for tag, you know. Okay, I can see that I didn't add any value there yet, but if I were to add it now, it's going to be similar with the name attribute under the input tag, which is last name. Likewise, for the label in the third section, which is the email section, the four attributes there is also going to have the same value as with the name attribute within the input tag. That's this. Also, we have the next section, which is the password label. Now, the password label is a very unique type. I know we didn't discuss about that because I think during the whole discussion, we mostly talked about text type. But in the password type, the type under the input tag below the label tag has a password, which we would see later on. Then in the fifth section, we have the label tag for the address section. Now you can notice that rather than having an input tag under that label tag, we have a text area tag. So unlike the first four sections, which are the first name, last name, email, and password, each of these sections actually have an input tag below the label tags. But the label tag for the address actually has a text area tag depending on how long a user's address could be. You never really know how long a person's address could be, where he's living, name of the street, the local government, the town, the state, the country. Some of these very important information need to be added, and that's the reason why we can't use the input tag in that section. So we rather use the text area tag. Sorry. So lastly, we have the input tag, which has a type of button. So I know I didn't discuss about this, but the button type is basically used, to submit the entire form. That's after you filled in your information within each of these tags listed above. Most times the button tag is the very last tag. It comes at the bottom of all the other forms within the form tag. So so now we'll be diving into the practical section of how this works. Yeah, so um this is the Visual Studio Code IDE. I hope many of you are conversant with it because I heard you guys, um this is not your first time being introduced to HTML. So I guess you guys must have used this once in a while, once upon a time. So now we are going to start with the very first section of what we learned today, which is the table tags. So the first things first would get the HTML boilerplate. It's a very, very important part of the, HTML document. Without it, you can't render anything on the web browser. So get this. So this is a shortcut to actually getting the boilerplate. I don't know if you all know this, but you can check online. You would see some, information about how to get the shortcut to the boilerplate rather than writing everything from scratch. But if for the sake of those who are new here, I think I would have to, go through the whole thing from scratch. So you would start with the doc type HTML syntax, which would tell us that this is an HTML document. Then we would start with the HTML tag itself. So the next section would be the head and the body. I'm sure you all must have learned about the basics of the HTML structure. So for those that are new here, I hope you all are learning how the whole structure works. So this is the HTML tag. It's divided into two sections, the head and the body. So we would have the head first, and next we would have the body section. So the head section would actually house, the important information about this HTML document, the meta tags, the title tags, some of those important info. Although these informations won't be rendered on the browser, I think we all know that. So it's just going to be here on the screen for we to know that okay, this is what this part of the document is for. While the body tag contains the entire content that is to be rendered on the browser. So we would have our head tag, we would have the title tag within the head tag. Within the title tag, we learned about HTML tables first. So we'll start with the table. We'll start with the tables first. So we would have HTML tables. Okay, sorry, that's wrong. HTML table, yeah. So we'd also have the meta tags. which are important also. Meta char set equals to UTF-8. Also, there are some other meta tags too, but I think for now, let's just dive into what is more important, which is the practical section of the HTML tables. So, as we learned earlier, we would start first with the table tag. So, we'd have the table tag. Then the table tag, as I explained before in the first section, it's divided into the head section and the body section. That is the table head and the table body. Just the same way in this HTML document, we have the head section and the body section. So we'll create the table head, and underneath the closing tag would have the table body. So now we know that this is the head section and this is the body section. So within the body, we would have our table row tags, and after that we have the table head tags, which specify the header cells within the table. Table header tag, it have three first. We have another. So this is the table header tags within the table row tags within the table head tags, as we saw earlier in the photo on the left. So for those who didn't see it or who saw it and didn't understand what that picture was, don't worry, this is an exact replica of what was there. Like, this is now the actual coding of the table. So now you would get to see how the table structure is like on the editor and how it's going to be rendered on the web browser very soon. So under, let's have some values within the table header. We could have first name. We also have last name, and lastly we would have email. you know so like I explained before, these table header tags are descriptive. That means they are going to be used to describe an entire column of what the data is going to be all about. So whatever you have under each of these table head tags is meant to be as it was described in the header section of the table. So next we'll go to the table body tag. So we would have the first row of data to be passed into the under the head, which would be, yeah, under the within the table row tag would be the TD tag. Yeah, it won't be the TH tag, because the TH tag, like I said before, they are used to connote the headers of the table. That's the header cells. While the TD tags are for the actual cells within the body. So we'd also have an equal number of table header tags. Yeah, so I think, I hope you all are practicing, or I don't know how, but if you can't practice while I'm doing it, at least try to understand what I'm typing, since I've explained it before. And for those that still have problem understanding, I'm also, trying to explain it once more, so it doesn't look like we got lost at any point. So now we have the table header tags within the T head tag defined as first name, last name, and email. So this particular section are going to come out as the header of the entire tables. So within this TR section is the next content. That's the actual content we are to fill within the body. So under the first name, we could have the first name of a random person. So I think we had Sheyi before. Yeah. Then in the next TD tag, we had Williams. And lastly, in the last TD tag, we had his email, since the last table header section connotes email. We would have an email here. Sheyi Wills at yahoo.com. Yeah. So this is actually the first row of data being passed in the table body. So this row is going to be the first data that would be directly under the table header tags. So now we would have subsequent rows to populate the table. Table row, table data tag, table data tag. Then the last row tag. So here we would have the next set of data to be passed within the table. So I think I remembered using a marker here. Yeah, NEK Chuku, and also an email, ek29 at gmail.com. So now we would have the last table row. Ah, okay. I think let's just use a fresh set of data. So we would have Frank here. Have as then lastly we would have yeah, an email. And course that's gmail.com. So right now we have an exact replica of the picture that was described before. That's when we learned about the HTML table tags. So we'd save this. Oh, sorry. This has been saved as form.html. So I would just copy this into the table file. Cut. Yeah. Then I'll paste this. So from the practical session, we can see that the codes are in proper indentation. That means they are arranged properly. They are not scattered. You can see the lines after the HTML tag. You have a line going down to the next HTML tag. Same with the head tag, the body tag, the table tag, the table head tag, and the table body tag. Proper indentation is very, very important while coding. It enables, better and easier understanding of the codes you're writing. And it also makes debugging very, very easy, because if the codes were to be scattered, you won't understand how the whole structure looks like. So we would save this and we would open our live server, which is connected to our browser. Yes, so we can see right now we have our HTML table rendered on the browser. As you can see, the header section has the first name, the last name, and the email. And under the first name column is Sheyi, Amaka, and Frank. Now we don't have all of Sheyi's details under it the way we wrote it column wise in the IDE. That's because each of these table data tag, in as much as they are within the table row tags, they are not going to be arranged horizontally, rather they will be arranged vertically row wise. That's why we have Sheyi Williams and his email at this end. So likewise we have Amaka Ikechukwu and her email at this other end. We also have Osas frankosas at gmail.com, also arranged the same way. So now let's try adding one more table data tag to one of these table row tags and see what the outcome looks like. So we'll have table data tag. Under the TR tag, let's just add a phone number, random phone number. Yeah, not a real phone number though. So if we should save this and open our live server, just as I explained before. So we can see that the next table data tag within the table tag actually has the data tag outside the table completely. So as I said earlier, yes, you might, write it accidentally or mistakenly. The editor won't even tell you there's an error. It would look like everything is just fine. But when you render it on the browser, then you realize that, your table isn't fine. Because unlike this other information we have passed into the table, we have the number on the screen outside the table completely. It's not even under any table head, which is meant to describe this as a number. So we have it outside. It's just going to be there, not not having any meaning or any purpose. So we'll remove this. And likewise, let's see what happens if we remove a table data tag. Let's remove Sheyi Williams at yahoo.com now. If we save this and render it on the browser by opening with our live server, I hope we all have live server installed. So if we open it with our live server, just as I explained previously, that particular space that is meant to house the next data in this row would remain empty. It will be dormant. Nothing is going to fill it up, no matter how many emails you keep adding. In as much as the email isn't under the table row that houses this data, nothing is going to be there. It's just going to be an empty space without nothing. Nothing will be there. It's just going to be empty, almost like the person doesn't have, an email. So that's how the table tag works. So let's just put it back. You will at gmail.com. Yeah. So if we save this now and run it again, we would have the actual results we had the first time. Yes. So now the whole table is structured, is arranged the way it is meant to be. Some particular type of data are under the columns they are meant to be under. Nothing is conflicting with anything. Everything is just arranged properly. Although for most tables we are conversant with, they always have borders. That means they have some particular lines that are used to demarcate or separate these columns from each other. That won't be discussed in this video anyways, since we are dealing with pure HTML. But once we get into the CSS section, we would come back to this table tag and would style it, and you would now see that you could have a proper table with lines in between to specify the different cells, because now each of these inputs, they are all cells, both the first name, last name, and email, and the other data under it. Each of them are cells. But now the cells aren't, they are not very obvious because the whole thing is just together. There's no, the way cells are properly. So they are within blocks which are formed by, different combination of lines. But here we do not have those. Although it's still a table, but it's just not like the table that most of us are used to. So as we keep on going on this journey, once we get to the CSS section, we'll come back to this document and style it and would have a well-defined table. Thank you. Yeah, so I think that's that for tables. Now we'll go into forms, the second section of today, forms. So we'll also start by, typing out the whole HTML structure, the HTML tags, the important blocks that sum up the entire HTML document, the HTML tag itself, the head tag. Then we'd have the body tag also. Well, we all know what these tags are, so I don't think I need to go over it again. Let's just dive into it. Title. So let's have our title to be HTML forms. Okay, yeah, the meta tag before I forget. Just UTF-8. Yeah. So under the body tag, we are going to have the form tag. So next, as we saw in the image below, before, we had the label tags and the input tags together, like not on the same line, but there were some spaces that they gave each other. So that's to show that the label and the input of a particular type of data, it has to show that the label and the input of a particular type of data are different from the next one coming after it. So we are not going to put everything together like the way we have in the table, in the table yeah in the table form. We're not going to have this, you know this closeness together, because having the input tags and the table tags together and creating a space would actually show that the two tags are for a particular and specific information within the form. So we'll be diving into that now. So we'll have the label tag first. Label tag. Let's have it to be first name. We'll also have the input tag, which is a single tag because it's not a multi-tag, so we don't need an ending tag. So right within the input tag, we'll start with the attributes, the type attributes, which determines the format of the data we are to pass into the input. So first name, of course, a name is a text, so the type attribute under this input tag will be the text type. That's why we have text. Next, we would have the name attribute. It gives a description of the input tag, as I said earlier, but like I said, this description is only for the developer. So if we were to render this on the web browser, the person who sees it wouldn't know what it is, but you who put it there would know it. So the name here will be first name, first name. Then the ID tag will be first name too. And lastly, the value, just a text would want to show in the input box for more clarity. First name. So this section is the section that is meant for the first name. So we'll create a space. Like I said before, the label and the input tag, they have to be close to each other and separated from other tags. That's for more clarity and understanding. And it's just a good coding practice. So we have the label tag, we have the last name, then next we'd have the input tag also. The type would also be of a text type since the last name is a text type. It consists of alphabets. So the name attributes here will be last name, and the ID would also be last name too. Like I said, the ID tags have to be unique. So you can see we have the ID of first name in the first section and the ID of last name in the second section, which is the last name. But we also have the same in the name attributes of both sections. But we could also choose to call both name attributes name. It won't really do anything. But the ID on the other hand cannot accept that kind of process. It must be very unique. So let's continue. The value the value here would be last name too. So we would see what this tag would render on the browser very soon once we are done. The next section we would have email section. So label email with its input tag too. Type would be equals to email. So you can see that even email has type its own type under the type attribute, and it doesn't necessarily have to use the text type, even though the text type would also accept it. So the next will be the name attribute, email too, the ID attributes with email also, and then the value attribute would be email too. Next, we would have the password section, which would have its label to be password, label input attribute. Sorry, the input tag under the password section. Here, the type would be password. So when we render this on the browser, you would see that the type attributes of each of these input tags would differ a lot once we start inputting our data into the input box. So the name here would be password, ID of password too. Although some people use just pass, you know, let's just use password. Then I don't think password input has a value tag because it will be so strange when you're trying to fill in a password and you already met, something there. So let's just leave it that way. So the next section will be the submit section, which would also have an input tag with the type submit and the value submit also. It could also hold a name attribute called submit too. Yeah. So I think that's that for the forms. So from what we can see here, we have up to four different type attributes within all the input tags. So we have the text type attributes, the text type, the email type, the password type, and the submit type. So if we save this and we then open it with our live server, which will be rendered on the browser, now you can see the HTML form. So because this is pure HTML, HTML by default doesn't, style the tags accordingly. That means it doesn't order them the way it arranges the table. It doesn't arrange the input tags and the label tags in that format. So let's just make this look better by adding line breaks to our code. So we'll add a line break tag which is denoted as BR tag. BR, BR. So now we have BR tags added to each is each label tag and input tag. So once we save this, we should see a better arrangement on the screen. Yes, so this is how it actually looks like. So this is actually better in a way. So let's see, does adding space do anything? Live server. Okay, no, it doesn't. Yeah, so this is what the table, I mean, sorry, this is what the form tag looks like with all the other tags put together. So save this again. We'll open with our live server. Yes, we have this, the form tag. So I know like this isn't similar with what most of you have seen, you know, in the modern day forms now, because most of those forms are styled with CSS, which we'll jump into later on when we get there, you know, while we are going. But right now, this is just purely HTML, no styling, nothing, just pure HTML syntax. So this is how a form would look like if it wasn't styled, if there wasn't any, styling at all. This is exactly how it would be like. So we have the first name above it. Now this first name, last name, email, and password above the input boxes are what the label tags rendered. So you can see that the label tags has first name in between, last name, email, password, which is why we have it in this format: first name, last name, email, and password. Unlike the submit input, it doesn't have a label above it, as you can see we didn't add one. So that's why it's also the way it is. So also we have a first name within the input box, same with last name and same with email. Why this is happening is because we added we assign a value to the value attribute within the input tag. Remember I said that the value attribute actually initializes a text within the input box. So under the input for the first name section, we can see that value is equals to first name. Under the last name section, we can see that value is equals to last name. And under the email section, the input tag there has value to be equals to email. But in the password section, the input where the password is, there is no value attribute there, which is why there's nothing showing there's nothing shown in the value box. Yeah, in the value input box. So there's nothing there in the password section. So we can erase this and pass in our information. First name can be Jane, last name can be Edward. Then you'd also pass in your email to Jane Edward gmail.com. Then you could also have a password also. So if we click on the password box, we'll type any password, but it's not going to reflect as an actual text or digit. It's just going to reflect in the password format the way it is meant to be. So whatever I type in, no matter what it is, you would always see it like this because we selected the type to be password under the password input. So that's why you have it to be in this format. So if it were to be in the text type, you would be able to see what you put in there. But since it isn't, under that type, you wouldn't be able to see that. So we have this to be in the password type. That's why the password is like this in the input box. So I think that's that for HTML forms. So I hope you all understand what HTML forms are. Although this is not the full structure of how the form is, meant to work because peradventure we click the submit button, you can see that everything disappears. And why that is because the HTML form tag, that means the tag itself, not the label tag or the input tag. The HTML form tag itself actually has its own attributes which are used to communicate with the information we just passed into the input box, most times with a database. And since we are just dealing with pure HTML, we wouldn't want to, dive into that yet. But don't worry, very soon, as we keep learning, when the need arises, we would eventually learn how that works and how the information we just passed now communicates with the database that is connected to. Thank you. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. So many questions have been dropped for you, sir. Please kindly go through them and help us with answers, sir. Thank you.
Okay, yes, I'm coming. How do I stop? Eh, okay. Check.